So, a very good evening and a warm welcome to everyone attending the final session in this four-part series, Chemistry Doesn't Matter. We aim to show you all that the chemistry is one of the most interesting sciences if we approach it the right way. This series is a collaboration between the Chemistry Society from Shiv Nada University and Carriers from Shiv Nada School. I am Madhav Samanta and I am co-hosting today's session with Abhyuday and Gunjan Gupta. Gunjan and I are members of Chemistry Society (SNU), and the Chemistry Society is a student-run body that aims to create an environment that is inviting to students who have a passion for the subject. We host various activities, events, and sessions to explore aspects of the subject beyond what textbooks may offer. We cannot proceed without thanking the mentors from Karyovas, Ms. Upasana Mittal and Mr. Mayank Agnihotri. We would also like to introduce and thank the mentors from Shiv Nada University, Dr. Bimlesh Lochab and Dr. Parthapratim Munshi. Today's session will focus on spectroscopy. We will try to ease all of you into the complex and vast field of spectroscopy and the scope of its applications. Most spectroscopy is the interaction between matter and EM waves, and thus we will discuss how this interaction can be interpreted and used for our benefit. With this, I would like to call Abhyuday to start off the session.
Hi guys, hope you're doing well today. So I think that Madhav forgot to mention that we'll also be focusing on spectrometry, and that's the topic that I'll be covering today. So what exactly is spectrometry? In this case, we talk about it as the measurement of the interactions between light and matter and the reactions and measurements of radiation intensity and wavelengths. In other words, spectrometry is a method of studying and measuring a specific spectrum, and it's widely used for the spectroscopic analysis of sample materials. I know this jargon may seem a little complicated, but don't worry, it's quite simple. Mass spectrometry is an example of a type of spectrometry, and it measures masses within a chemical sample through their mass to charge ratio. Now, I'd like to show you a short video on what exactly a mass spectrometer is. If you guys can just have a look at the image, it'll be nice. Gunjan, can I share my screen now?
Yes, Abhyuday, go ahead.
Okay, guys, I hope you can see my screen. I will mute myself and I'll let the video play.
For a sample of chlorine gas, we can estimate that 75% of the atoms would be chlorine 35 and the remaining 25% would be chlorine 37. These different forms of an element are known as isotopes. All isotopes of an element have the same number of protons, but a slightly different number of neutrons. This concept of isotopes was actually discovered using an analytical technique known as mass spectrometry. For chemical research, the pharmaceutical industry, and in forensic science, there are many techniques and tests to identify a synthesized compound or a sample obtained from a crime scene. One crucial technique is calculating the molecular mass of a compound or a sample. This can be done using a mass spectrometer. The beauty of mass spectrometry is that only a very small sample is required. This is important when only a small sample is made or if the evidence is only present in minute amounts. A sample must first be vaporized. Once this is done, the vaporized sample is then bombarded with a beam of electrons. This beam of electrons knocks off electrons from the molecules which make up the sample, creating positively charged ions. This process is known as ionization. The ions formed usually have a +1 or a +2 charge. These ions are then accelerated in an electric field before being deflected by a magnetic field. The pattern of deflection according to charge and mass can then be depicted on a spectrum. The The main idea here is that ions with a large mass to charge ratio, meaning a large mass and a small charge, are deflected less than ions with a smaller mass to charge ratio. When this was done using a sample of neon, the resulting pattern of deflection showed that 3 isotopes of neon existed: neon 20, neon 21, and neon 22. The positions of the peaks on the spectrum will tell you the mass of those ions. Besides showing the existence of these isotopes, the isotopic abundance can also be determined from the mass spectrum. The height or the intensity of a given peak tells you the relative abundance. So when a crime scene investigator gives the lab even a small fleck of a white powder, its molecular mass can help identify what it is. In summary, mass spectrometry is an analytical technique used to determine the molecular mass of a compound and indirectly helped to prove the existence of isotopes.
Anyone like to ask any questions in regards to that video? Please, Adi, be my guest.
Okay, so how can we bombard electrons at any compound or element?
That's a very good question. So the process itself is called ionizing.
Okay.
We can cover it in the future at some time. But yes, it is possible.
Okay.
So, Adi, there are. Okay, Madhav, you can take this.
Okay. So I'll just add on to what Abhyuday said. So what happens in a atom? So the electrons are all revolving around the nucleus, right? So by providing heat and some kind of external energy, we can force the atom to release one or more electrons. And now by using other magnetic or electric, features on it, we can force that electron to accelerate in a particular direction. By doing this, we can bombard a particular material, molecule, even sheets. Gold foil experiment is a very good example for this, and that is how we can bombard particles onto different kind of molecules.
Oh, okay.
All right, Abhivek, take it away.
Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, so Gunjan, do you mind showing us the next screen? So now I'm going to be talking about applications of the mass spectrometer in industry. Can anyone identify what this is?
I think it is the Mars rover
Mars
that was
rover,
sent to
yes.
Mars.
Spot on,
Curiosity.
guys. Spot on. Well
Yeah,
done.
curiosity.
Give yourself a clap.
I think it's going to analyze all the Martian sand.
Spot on, yes. So yes, you're 100% right. In this case, the practical use of mass spectrometry includes isotope dating and proton characterization. And we use, in this case, we're using an independent roving space exploration robot, which is the Mars lander. And also they carry mass spectrometers so that they can analyze the foreign soils, which is exactly what you said. Do you guys have any questions about this? Okay, how about I ask you guys a question? Why do you think we analyze the soil of Mars? Yes.
So that we can
I think
see that any rover that we have to land on there, the density of the soil and what are the types of soil and what is the properties of soil, so that how weight resistant it is, so that we can make like houses, or we can land many rockets or like rovers on it.
Very good answer. I really like that answer. Can
and
anyone
also to find out the history of Mars, to find out how it used to be.
Why do we do that?
Like Like, so we could
Existence of life.
Yes, that's a very good answer. I really like that one. Okay, Adi, can I hear
Okay,
your
so there
answer?
can be multiple reasons like for checking for the existence of life, that if life is possible, or maybe that is there some mineral that is rare on earth or is very valuable which is not on earth, like that.
Great answer, guys. I love the interaction. Gunjan, could we have the next slide, please? So now my colleague Madhav will be talking about spectroscopy, and I just want to highlight a few differences. So spectroscopy is a science of studying the interaction between matter and radiated energy. It's the study of absorption and emission characteristics of matter or absorption behavior of matter when subjected to electromagnetic radiation. Spectroscopy doesn't generate any results. It's simply the theoretical approach to science. On the other hand, spectrometry is the method used to acquire a quantitative measure of the spectrum. Its practical application where results are generated, helping in the quantification of, for example, absorbance, optical density, or transmittance. In short, spectroscopy is a theoretical science, and spectrometry is the practical measurement in the balancing of matter and atomic and molecular levels. With that, I'd like to invite Madhav to talk about spectroscopy.
All right. So a quick game. Can somebody guess what all these images are? And I want you to guess the shadows, obviously. So starting with the top left-hand side, what is the image? Yeah, go for it. You can unmute directly and tell me.
The first one is
bird.
bird.
Yeah. What about the second one?
Panther? Like a tiger, lion, something like
White.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Looks a lot like a tiger. And what about the third one on the bottom
Rabbit.
left?
It's a
Rabbit.
rabbit.
What is it?
Yeah. And what about the final one?
Wolf, I guess.
dog.
Yeah,
Wolf.
dog, wolf, almost close species. So yeah, you're right. So what this exercise actually told us is that just by looking at the shadows, you could guess what it could be. Now, much of spectroscopy has deals with the similar thing. We take a matter, so instead of the hands of the person making the shadows, there is some molecule, some matter in there, and we take a lot of different kind of light from the electromagnetic spectrum. We'll talk about that in a while. So we take a lot of different lights and shine it on this molecule. Now, whatever result we get from the interaction between the EM wave and matter, like maybe scattering or absorbance or any other property that the matter shows regarding the EM wave, we get some result based on that, just like the shadows that you see. So based on the shadows, like you could guess what the shape was. Similarly, we try to look at the results of what the interaction produced and then guess what the matter was composed of. So now I'll just go to the next slide and ask you another question. Can you guess what the machine on the left is? Yeah,
Like,
go for it.
it's used for like,
Go for it,
MRI.
please.
MRI.
yeah,
Absolutely
MRI.
right. The one on the
It's
left
used to
is
look at brain activity.
exactly. You're absolutely correct. So on the machine on the left is a MRI machine. Now, what if you wanted to perform an MRI for molecules? What do? So we have this machine on the right, which is called an NMR machine or nuclear magnetic resonance, which works in the same principles as that of MRI machines, and thus we are able to look in like as to what the molecule is doing, right, and what the molecule is. So I'll just request Gunjan to go to the next slide. Yeah. So can somebody tell me what is the smallest magnet that they know of?
The atom.
The atom. Yeah, that's a good answer. Close enough. Anyone else? I mean,
Maybe a
anything?
domain.
Sorry.
Like, since like magnets,
Yeah.
like they're composed of like a small patches called domains, which
Right.
like exert magnetic force on a certain areas
Right.
and certain directions.
Right. So that happens in bulk. So the smallest magnet that I know of currently is the electron. So the concept of electron being a magnet is exploited in nuclear magnetic resonance, and that's how we get NMRs. So what happens is we apply an external magnetic field. So on the left, you can see there's a sphere and an arrow is passing through it. So let's say that particular electron is spinning upward, and it's okay, and it is the representative magnet is the one magnet on the left. So the north is on the top and the south is at the bottom. So when you apply an external magnetic field, what happens? It suddenly switches the spin. This causes a difference in energy. And by applying radio waves to this atom, we can study and this the unique excitation that has happened here, and thus we get a result which is resembles what we have on the right. So this one is done for 2-propanol, and what has happened is the line on the extreme right represents all the hydrogens that are connected to the carbons except the one carbon which is in the middle. The second line from the right represents that one hydrogen attached to the central carbon, the carbon which is also attached to two other carbons. And the small patch of lines which is on the left, which is the leftmost patch, is actually representative of the hydrogen which is connected to the oxygen. So that is how MRI works. And MRI is unique to particular different functional groups, and that's how we can identify a molecule with even a small amount present there. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, can anybody guess what's the rightmost image?
Xbox 3.
This is
The Connect, like it used like cameras to sense depth.
it is a thermal camera that sends the thermal activity of a person's body. So like the red parts are like the hottest parts, and green I think and blue are like the cold parts.
Right. And what about the image in the center? A lot of us have seen this
It is
recently.
like a thermometer gun that uses infrared light to
Right. So a very important aspect of our everyday life has become infrared has become a very important aspect of our everyday lives, right? So this Xbox 360 has this system called Kinect, which helps it judge the distance between the camera and the user, and helps the user interact with the game just by moving around. This uses infrared frequencies, and as somebody rightly mentioned, on the left there is a man whose infrared imaging has been done, and in between there's this thermometer. So what happens is how does this infrared camera read all this heat signatures, and how is it working? What's happening is our body has all these molecules, right? All matter is made of molecules, so our body is also made of molecules. On the surface of our body generates heat. That heat is causes these molecules to vibrate in a particular manner, and thus they release out the energy in form of IR radiations. Now, if I ask you what would happen if I did just the opposite of it, what if I took IR radiation and put it on a molecule? What do you expect would happen? Okay, a starting question. What happens when sunlight falls on us? How do you feel?
It starts to get hot down that area where it falls.
Right, right. So what happens is sunlight is a form of energy, again, just like any other electromagnetic
Light
wave.
energy.
Right. It provides us some heat. And just like that, when we talk about IR, let's just see what happens to the IR. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
ये तो नाच रहे
Silence! Speak in English.
The letters are dancing.
Well, he's not wrong. It's not the letters, but the molecules. So you can see some vibrations and stretching happening on the left, right? Those are all water molecules. And this is what infrared light does to molecules. But there is something very special about it. What happens is, on the next slide, you'll see that every vibration is unique to a particular functional group. So let's say the alcohol group on the 2-propanol, that is shown in that peak, the peak which Gunjan just pointed out at 3500. So that is the OH, functional group. Just like that OH, there are other peaks. All those peaks represent some or the other group here, and some or the other vibrating bond. And all of these IR spectrums are very unique, and that's how we can identify a molecule. Now on the left, on the bottom, you can see a machine that's called an FTIR machine, and this is what we use to get a graph like the one we have on the right hand side. All right, so now Gunjan is going to talk a little bit more about Raman spectroscopy, and I'll just pass it on over to her.
Okay, so as Madhav mentioned, that IR is used to vibrate or stretch molecules and bonds. Raman uses that property, but in the reverse way. Just the way he was talking about how we're putting IR and then seeing which of them get absorbed. In this, we'll do the exact reverse. First, we will excite the molecules using laser or some other method to excite them. And when they're relaxing and coming back to their stable state, they will then emit unique IR frequencies. And those are those sharp lines that you see. So our detector can then find out which specific peaks at which they are releasing. And from that, we can find out, okay, so if it's emitting at this point, that means this functional group must be in the molecule. And from that, we can then find out or detect what molecule we're using. Yes, Araf?
Ma'am, so you're saying that when you're exciting the molecules, you're using a laser, but how is that exciting them?
Okay, that's a great question. So what is laser or heat or any of those things? In the end, they are a source of energy, right?
Correct.
So it is basically like me giving you a bottle of Gatorade and I'm like, yes, now get energy, get pumped. So me shining that laser on that molecule is giving that the energy to get excited. And now, obviously, this bottle of Gatorade is going to get over at some point, and then your molecule or you will get tired, right? So when it's coming back down, it will emit those energies. Does that help?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Awesome. So that is how Raman spectroscopy works. Now I will talk about UV vis spectroscopy. So the unique thing, just like Madhav was talking about shadows, UV vis spectroscopy does the exact same thing. We have a sample, we put the sample in the middle and we shine light of specific wavelengths one after the other. And then on the other side is a detector. And based on which of them don't pass through, we will know which of the specific frequencies that the molecule is absorbing. So those energies are the unique energies that the molecule needs to get excited. So the electron gets excited through this process. So what the cool thing about this method is, it can allow us to find out if there's some kind of impurity. It can allow us to compare between different types of molecules to find out, oh, is this molecule having a double bond with something? Or, oh, is this some kind of long chain hydrocarbon? Or, oh, does this molecule have a specific color when in bulk? So suppose you had very little trace amount, so you wouldn't be able to tell what the color is. But using this, you can then predict, okay, if I had a lot of this sample, this is the kind of color it would look like. So that is some of the cool applications of UV vis spectroscopy. Then, would you guys be able to tell me what you see on the left?
The ribcage.
Okay.
X-ray.
Yeah.
Like the machine, it projects X-ray, and
Yeah.
like due to the different objects, like it bouncing back at like different ways, we can see what objects are inside. In the first
Exactly.
case, we could see the lungs and the bones. In the second case, we could see the tablet, headphones, phone, glasses.
Excellent. Exactly. So this is something that is very unique to X-ray, just like every different wave is doing its unique thing, like IR is making things dance. This way, X-ray is allowing us to see through the layers. Now, we will use this property of X-ray and exploit it to figure out what our molecules look like. So this is an X-ray diffractometer. So this method actually allows us to look through different layers of a substance and kind of get a 3D visualization of what the molecule looks like. So what happens is we place whatever substance we want to analyze in the center, and we are passing a specific frequency of X-ray through it. And based on where it's scattering, how it's scattering, we can then get a visualization of the entire crystal structure. We can pretty much draw, okay, this is where this atom is, and this is where it's placed. So it kind of gives a very comprehensive idea of exactly what you're dealing with. And because it gives you an exact idea of what you're dealing with, it provides you a lot of information which has been used for many Nobel laureate winning case studies and experiments. So can anyone guess what is on the right side?
Atom.
Okay, I will give you a hint.
DNA image.
Yes. So this was an experiment. Yeah. So thank you, Vilakshan, Adi, and all. So this is an X-ray image of the DNA, and it was actually what led to the Nobel Award winning this thing, prediction of the structure of DNA. So that's how comprehensive an idea. So you can take pretty much any crystal or any substance that is solid and pretty much guess exactly what's in your substance using this method. So any questions so far? Are you guys with me so far?
Why doesn't the DNA look like
Yes.
a strand? Why does it look like only a
That's
strand?
a great question. So many of you might know. So that strand, if you look from the center of the strand, this is kind of what you'd see, right? The spiral. So
Chromosomes.
exactly. Not exactly. These are actually the rings. So one sec. Let me try to help you see it a little better. So do you see these rungs like the ladder rungs?
Yes.
Right? So this is actually what you're seeing. You're kind of seeing the DNA like a tube from the inside,
Oh,
from the center.
okay.
And these are the rungs. So then you can, from that, the scientist was able to predict that, okay, the molecule is kind of like a spiral that's going up. Okay.
Okay.
So that's how they were able to guess that, cool, this is the DNA structure. And they were able to get the Nobel laureate because they were able to precisely predict what it looked like.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So, yeah. Obviously, covering all aspects of spectroscopy is a very big challenge to do within one session because there's so much we can cover and there's so many details we can get into. And giving too much information would have made us lose touch of what we're talking about. So we didn't want to make it too daunting a task. So I hope that we gave you a small, exciting taste of what spectroscopy and the field of detecting molecules and being molecular detectives is like, and how we can use various different types of light and use the way that different light behave to understand what the substance is. And obviously the subject, to explore the subject and to understand the subject, it requires a much deeper knowledge of light and matter. So if this is something you found interesting, there are multiple different ways of going about to joining it. You could become a particle physicist, you could learn quantum chemistry, you could even be a forensic scientist or an analytical chemist, or if you're a biologist, you would use this field a lot too. So there are so many fields that use this and so many fields through which you can learn the area of spectroscopy. So yeah, we hope that this session motivated you to understand the subject, and hope that all 4 sessions were enjoyable to all of you. Thank you. Also, please stay back for attendance, and we will love to hear some more inputs about how the sessions have been and all that with you for now.
So, Gunjan, may I invite 2 chemistry, passionate chemistry educators who have joined today?
Yes,
May
of
I
course.
listen from Dilsheen ma'am, who is in the session? How was the session, ma'am? Dilsheen ma'am? So, if you are speaking, you are on mute. And Jayati ma'am. both Jati ma'am, are you there in the session? I think she was
I
there.
am there. I am there. Hello.
Would like to listen feedback from you because I see Gunjan and Madhav and Abhyuday, I mean, a great peer tutors. I mean, we are so, more than anyone, we are honored that they took session with our kids of all different classes. Jati ma'am, over to you.
Thank you so much. And I was, every time you showed an apparatus, I really wanted to go there at SNU and handle. So thank you for showing us online. And actually, in IBDP, our students do in organic chemistry. We have an extensive topic on all these spectral lines and spectroscopy. So whether it is IR, whether it is NMR, so they are doing it and doing it without looking at these apparatus is a challenge. So thank you for taking this up. It was wonderfully created. Also looking at the standard of the students who are attending. I think Upasana and Mayank sir also provided the inputs. One thing I want to ask is, can we invite you to come to our classes and talk to our students sometime? Is that possible?
We'll talk this separately. Recording, we are taking feedback. Jati ma'am will connect with Gunjan and we'll talk it separately.